The courtroom was silent as the judge adjusted his glasses and looked down at the woman standing before him. Her hands were clenched, her face calm, but anyone could see the weight she carried. The case had been dragging on for weeks, and now the moment of truth had arrived. Everyone in the room held their breath as the judge cleared his throat. "Miss Carter," he began, his voice firm yet unreadable. The words that followed would change everything. A steep one. The kind that could ruin a person's life. Gasps rippled through the small audience, murmurs spreading like wildfire. Miss Carter didn't flinch. She had expected this, maybe even worse. But was this justice? Or was it something else? The tension in the air was thick, the unspoken question hanging between the walls of the courtroom. As she turned to leave, her eyes briefly met those of the man who had brought the case against her. There was no satisfaction in his expression, just something colder. The real battle wasn't over. If anything, it had just begun. What really happened in that courtroom? And why did this case feel bigger than just a fine? As Miss Carter stepped out of the courtroom, the cold air hit her like a slap. She pulled her coat tighter around her, but the chill wasn't just from the weather. It was in the way people looked at her, the sideways glances, the whispers, the judgment in their eyes. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from her sister. Asterisk, asterisk, call me. "No, asterisk, asterisk," she sighed, knowing the conversation would be filled with worry, frustration, and the same question she had been asking herself over and over. Asterisk, asterisk, why did this happen, asterisk, asterisk? She had always believed in doing the right thing. She worked hard, followed the rules. But somewhere along the way, those rules had started to feel different for her than for everyone else. And now she was the one paying the price. Across the street, the man who had stood against her in court was getting into his car. He barely glanced in her direction before driving away, like she was just another problem he had crossed off his list. But Miss Carter knew better. This wasn't over. What had really led to that moment in the courtroom? And more importantly, what was she going to do next? Miss Carter's fingers hovered over her phone screen. She wanted to call her sister, to hear a voice that felt familiar, safe. But what could she even say? That she had lost. That the system had done exactly what she feared it would. Instead, she slipped the phone back into her pocket and kept walking. The city felt different now, colder in a way she couldn't explain. Every passing car, every hurried pedestrian seemed to exist in another world, one where this wasn't happening. She turned the corner and spotted the cafe where she had met her lawyer just weeks ago. Back then, she had hope. She thought the facts would be enough, that the truth mattered. Inside, she ordered a coffee and sat by the window, watching as life moved on without her. Across the table, a man cleared his throat. It took her a second to recognize him. James Holloway, a local journalist. He had been sitting in the back of the courtroom, watching everything unfold. "I think people need to hear your story," he said, leaning in slightly. "The real story." Miss Carter studied his face, searching for an agenda. Did she really want to open that door? Because once she did, there was no going back. Miss Carter stirred her coffee, her mind racing. James Holloway's words hung in the air between them. The real story. She had spent weeks trying to defend herself in court, only to be dismissed, like her voice didn't matter. And now this stranger was offering her a chance to be heard. But at what cost? She met his eyes. "And what exactly do you think the real story is?" James leaned forward. "I think you were set up. I think someone wanted this case to go a certain way. And I think you know it too." A sharp chill ran down her spine. He wasn't wrong. There were details that never added up, conversations behind closed doors that she wasn't meant to overhear. The way the prosecutor had pushed so hard, the way the judge fairly looked at her. She had tried to tell herself it was all in her head, but deep down, she knew better. Before she could respond, the bell above the cafe door jingled. She glanced up and her stomach dropped. A man in a dark suit had just walked in, his eyes scanning the room. When they landed on her, he didn't look away. She wasn't imagining it. Someone was watching her. And now she had to decide, stay quiet or fight back. Miss Carter's grip tightened around her coffee cup. The man in the dark suit wasn't just looking at her. He was studying her, like he already knew what she was going to do next. She forced herself to stay calm, but her pulse pounded in her ears. James noticed her tense posture. "You know him?" he asked under his breath. "I don't think so," she muttered. But that wasn't entirely true. Something about him felt familiar, like a shadow from a memory she couldn't quite place. The man walked toward the counter, ordered a black coffee, then casually took a seat a few tables away. He didn't speak, didn't move much, just sat there, as if he was waiting. James slid his phone across the table. "I did some digging before I reached out to you," he said. "The judge on your case, he has connections to the man who brought the charges against you. Business dealings, campaign donations, and it gets worse." Miss Carter exhaled slowly, forcing herself to focus. "What do you mean?" James hesitated before lowering his voice. "There's another case, same judge, same prosecutor. Different person, but the pattern is there." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Asterisk asterisk, "You need to stop. This won't end well for you." Asterisk asterisk. She felt the weight of the words sink in. This wasn't just a legal case anymore. Someone was making sure she lost. And if she kept pushing, they wouldn't just ruin her. They'd silence her completely. Miss Carter stared at the message on her phone, her hands cold despite the heat of the cafe. She had been afraid before, but this was different. This was a warning. A final one. James saw the look on her face. "What is it?" She showed him the screen. His jaw tightened. "They know we're talking." The man in the suit hadn't moved, but she could feel the weight of his presence. Every nerve in her body told her to get up and leave, to disappear before things got worse. But that's exactly what they wanted. Fear, silence, compliance. Instead, she took a deep breath and stood. "I'm done being afraid," she said quietly. James nodded. "Then let's finish this." They left the cafe together, stepping into the cold air. As they walked, James spoke fast. "I sent everything I found to a contact at the state attorney's office. If they take it seriously, this could be huge." Miss Carter wasn't sure if she believed in justice anymore, but it was too late to turn back. She was all in. Then just as they reached the corner, a car screeched to a stop in front of them. The back door flew open, and stepping out wasn't a stranger, but someone Miss Carter never expected to see. Someone she thought she could trust. Her sister.